Playmakers come in many different forms. The most overt differentiation is depth. The classic 10, called the Enganche in Argentina, a Trequartista in Italy, and a meia-armador or meia-atacante in Brazil, versus a deep-lying playmaker, sometimes referred to as a regista in Italy. In the classic Argentine 4-3-1-2, the primary playmaker in the hole is called an enganche, which translates as hook. Football in Argentina morphed from a 4-3-3 in the 1970s to a 4-3-1-2 in the 1980s. The 4-3-3 saw a central, solidly defensive midfielder whose job it was to spoil, flanked by a slightly more advanced box-to-box player, perhaps more recognisable from the English game, and a playmaker, the 10. Ahead of this three played a striker and two wingers. This formation could become a version of a 4-2-4 similar to that found in Brazil during this period, with the 10 pushed up into a withdrawn forward role. It's worth remembering too that in Brazil's 1982 World Cup side, the Seleção actually played two attacking playmakers, Zico and Socrates, in a narrow but highly fluid 4-2-2-2. Over time, the defensive vulnerabilities of the system built around an advanced playmaker became apparent, as the 10's defensive contribution was mitigated by his attacking duties, or vice versa. Thus, a wide player was withdrawn to become another more defensively minded midfielder, in the style of the 8 from the 4-3-3, with the 10 operating in the hole behind the two strikers, one of whom might drift wide or even drop into the hole as well. Famous examples such as Diego Maradona, Ariel Ortega or Juan Román Riquelme all brought different strengths to the role. Maradona especially was a more all-rounded player, contributing goals as well as creativity, while the laconic Riquelme exemplified a more static form of playmaker, around whom the other members of the team moved, with him as a focal point. This version of the 4-3-1-2 was voguish not just in Argentina, but has persisted especially in Italy. Cesar Prandelli used a form of 4-3-1-2 in Euro 2012, and Carlo Ancelotti's Milan side of the mid-2000s sometimes played a 4-3-1-2 or even a 4-1-2-2-1, which featured at least one attacking playmaker in the 10 role. Roma's 06-07 team under Luciano Spalletti even featured a playmaker with no real strikers, with Francesco Totti, a Trequartista, scoring goals and playing in the rest of the midfield for goals as well. But, as is so often the case in football tactics, defences have adapted to counter this system and now mark the creative player playing in the hole. This obsolescence, as teams playing with 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1 could exploit overloads out wide to circumvent the 4-3-1-2, has meant that a pure 10, such as was seen in the 70s onwards, is now more scarce. The Enganche's freedom from defensive duties is also out of keeping with the modern game's desire to press from the front in many teams, especially when the 10 is faced with a deeper lying playmaker of the Andrea Pirlo or Xavi Alonso type. 10s are still used in the 4-2-3-1, but as defensive contribution has become more important with the increases both of zonal marking around the pitch and pressing, a 10 is expected to be more capable of tracking and closing the opposition, ball winning and even orchestrating the press. A high press, particularly if the trigger is the ball moving wide, requires the 10 to move across and assist the winger and striker. That's not to say that the classic 10 is dead, and players like Mesut Ozil still fulfill that role to an extent, although a lot of Premier League creativity is supplied either from deep or from inside forwards or a narrow attacking midfield 3 with rotation, which makes it harder to state a case for the classic 10 being part of the setup. Someone like Dele Alli is perhaps most overtly a Michael Platini-style second striker, a player with some creative duties but also tasked with bursting into the box to strike from layoffs or running into the space created by the striker. The languid playmaking style of Juan Román Riquelme might have largely been nullified by defensive changes, but the art of the playmaker is still necessary, even if such a player is expected to do a lot more besides.